Hello, welcome to the Crocker Art Museum. My name is Amelia Kit Yu Chow. I am the adjunct curator of Asian art here at the museum. And welcome and thank you for joining me on this live stream presentation of two objects in our Jade exhibition, Chinese Jade exhibition. Today I would like to present to you two vessels of jade. One is an incense burner that you see on the right side of the display case. It is a beautiful three-legged vessel that has what we call exaggerated handles on both sides and made from a creamy light green jade. And as you probably can see, it's very richly decorated with all sorts of motifs and decorations on the body, as well as the lid and the stand. The other object, which is the kind of whitish vessel, is we just call it a vessel. Essentially, it is a very simply formed container that has these kind of sectioned forms and is in a roughly kind of rhomboid form on a beautiful custom wood stand. I am particularly enamored with both of these objects, not just because they're beautiful, but also I think they kind of embody the extremes of taste for Chinese jade objects throughout the centuries. Both of these are later Chinese objects. They're 18th to maybe 19th to 20th century, but we can talk a lot about them as they relate to more ancient art forms. Just a little bit of background about Chinese jades. The Chinese have been using jade to make art objects for over 5,000 years now. Jade making continues to be an active art form in China. In fact, there are some pretty amazing Chinese jade artists at work nowadays making some really tremendous art forms. So it's something that, if you're interested in jades, it's worth looking into. Just Google, contemporary Chinese jades, and you will find an amazing array of Chinese jade art objects, in addition to jewelry, which you very often see, in stores as well as online. So a little bit more background about Chinese jades. The Chinese call jade in general by the term yu. And yu can refer in general to two different types of stones. One is called nephrite, one is called jadeite. Nephrite has been mined from Western China as well as northeastern China, since the Neolithic times. So, around 3,000, 4,000 BCE. And the Chinese have been making jade out of nephrite, jade objects out of nephrite since then. Jadeite, on the other hand, came not from China itself, but they were imported from the Kingdom of Burma, which is now referred to as Myanmar, probably in the late Ming Dynasty, but they became popular in use in jade making in China from about the 18th century onwards. So both nephrite and jadeite are very hard stones, and they differ from other hard stones in that both nephrite and jadeite have very dense structures. Their crystalline structures are very, very dense, which makes them very hard to carve as we understand the word carving. So when you think about carving wood objects, carving objects from bamboo, you cannot carve jades that way. So in order to reveal the colors, the brilliance of of jade objects. Jade need to be very, very patiently ground down and polished using a combination of abrasive sands and metallic tools. So the process of making jade objects is extremely time-consuming and labor-intensive, which obviously also means that they have to be made at great expense. So jade objects in China have always been associated with prestige, and really only the upper classes have access to the type of resources to allow them to make jades or own jades. Let's see. The earliest jades in China, in Chinese history essentially, were burial goods. Because I think of the fact that they were so hard to work, it's believed in early Chinese history that jades have protective powers, and that they could even protect the human body from decay. So the earliest Chinese jades were found in tombs, and often they were found either covering or surrounding the body of the deceased. Now, by the time these two pieces were made, jade in the Chinese belief system have kind of moved from these early thoughts into more of them being associated with what we call gentlemanly virtues, such as benevolence, such as honesty, such as generosity of spirit. So these two objects, as we think about them now, they're very obviously decorative objects, but at the same time, they recall the ancient objects that were maybe at times interred with the jades. We talked about jades being burial goods. Another art form that is found in Chinese tombs were ritual bronze vessels. And it just so happens that both of these vessels were based in form on early Chinese ritual bronzes. So if we look at the incense burner, on the green incense burner, you see that it's a three-legged form with a rounded body. And the form itself is very likely based on a ritual bronze food vessel known as a ding. And if you can see the details of the decorations on the body, they actually also resemble the decorations that were found on ancient Chinese bronzes. So on two sides of this jade incense burner, we have what we call a monster mask that is known as taotie in Chinese. These monster masks, you can see, first of all, a pair of eyes. They usually have a pair of eyes, rounded eyes. I think on this vessel, they have kind of eye-shaped, pointed ends. And then there usually are a pair of horns. Sometimes there's a mouth with fangs hanging out. Sometimes there's a tail that kind of recedes on one end. And usually these masks are symmetrical in shape. And so you see a pair of eyes with a nose ridge kind of going down the middle of the face that kind of bisects all of the features. So this face that you see on two sides of the body of the jade piece, as I said, they are based on the decorations that are found on a lot of ritual bronzes in early China. Now, I mentioned that this object is probably a 19th to 20th century object. So in addition to it being based in form and decoration on ancient bronzes, it actually also has very much more contemporary features, especially in the openwork lid as well as the openwork base. The lid is really, really beautiful. The openwork is essentially a mass of lotus blossoms and lotus leaves, and the finial or the knob on top of the lid shows more lotus blossoms as well as a lotus pod at the top. And then the base, which I think we have a photo of, which you unfortunately can't see in the current display, but we have a photo of, shows a dragon, a front-facing dragon in a central circle that is surrounded by more floral and cloud scrolls. Now, these actually are more probably based on ceramic and textile designs, or derived from ceramic and textile designs that are much, much later than, let's say, the Taotia mask was based on ancient Chinese bronzes. So essentially, by the time that these jades were created, you have much more of a blending of ancient motifs, ancient design, with more decorative elements that are taken from other media of Chinese art, such as I mentioned, textiles and ceramics. So going from the incense burner to the vessel, again, this is a very simple form that is nonetheless also based on, likely, also based on a ancient bronze drinking vessel called zun. It's kind of rhomboid in shape and a little bit compressed in the front and back. But the form itself was probably also likely derived from a metallic or a metal vessel that would have been made in the Tang Dynasty. So we're talking about 7th to 10th century. And also interestingly, the form, when I first saw this piece, reminded me of Ming Dynasty spittoons. It's a kind of, rather pedestrian thing when you think about spittoons, but there have been spittoons made out of ceramic that are in this sort of shape that have been dated back to the Ming Dynasty. But I'd like to think that because this piece was made from such a beautiful kind of whitish jade with a very pale celadon tinge, that it's such a beautiful jade that this is made more as a decorative object and less as an actual spittoon that was used. So both of these, as I said, were pieces that might have taken their form from ancient vessels, but they have kind of also evolved in their decoration and or form to appeal to collectors of their times. So, we're thinking that the vessel was made probably around the 18th century, and then the incense burner 19th to 20th century. And we also are quite confident that both of these are what we call scholar objects. In other words, they were made likely to be used by gentlemen scholars in their studies or for display on their desks. So a little bit of background about these scholars. Pretty much throughout dynastic China, starting from about the Han Dynasty, the Chinese, essentially the Chinese bureaucratic government were run by a class of gentlemen who were very learned in the classics, in literature, in poetry making. They're also, skilled in making paintings and writing calligraphy. These folks would have made essentially the class of men that would have very much treasured jade. Jade, from a long time ago, were thought of as embodying gentlemanly virtues. And many of these scholar gentlemen not only studied jades, but they also collected jades. So they could have access to ancient values. They could explore ancient ideas. And these connoisseurs essentially formed a class of men who would commission these jades to be made in whatever form that pleases them, sometimes copying ancient bronze vessels, as I mentioned before, and other times they would have jades made as personal adornments, personal objects that they could carry on their body. So, these two pieces we would like to think would have graced a scholar's desk or would have been in use in a scholar's studio. And, the 19th, 20th century piece, the incense burner, was probably made in that spirit, if not, for an actual use in a scholar's studio or a scholar's or actual use in a scholar's space. What else did I want to say? I don't know. Maybe I need Mallory to remind me. How these pieces came into the Crocker's collection. We were fortunate in that the Crocker Art Museum over the centuries, over the decades, I should say, over the decades have had donations from collectors that helped form its collection, and it's no different with the Asian collection, the Chinese collection. So the vessel, the simple form vessel, came from Mr. and Mrs. Allen Rhodes, who in the late 1970s gave the Crocker Art Museum a small collection of Chinese ceramics. And they're quite interesting. They kind of span a couple of different dynasties. But amongst the ceramics was this one jade piece, which you see on display now. It was really interesting because it was the only one jade piece that they gave that I could research out, and it's a spectacular piece, as you can see. And then the incense burner came from a very recent gift from a couple of local collectors in the Bay Area, Eugenia and Kathleen King, who approached the museum in 2020, I believe, with a family collection of over 30 jades that they would like to give to the museum. So these came in 2021, and the 36 objects that came in also kind of ran they were a variety of scholars' objects. There were some personal adornment jades, but a good number of them are vessels similar to the incense burner, which was not something that the Crocker's existing collection has. So, with this gift of over 30 objects that came in 2021, we were able to select a good number of them to put together with the Crocker's existing collection of Chinese jades to put this exhibition together. We're quite pleased that this has been on view and will be on view for another 3 weeks or so. It closes on November 13th, I believe, or 15th, 13th, I think. So hopefully you will have a chance to come and see the exhibition and, like me, admire these two objects in person and up close. So thank you. That's, I think, all I have.